skies. Harvard did a great study on this. You see, every industry goes through 4 major phases. Phase 1 is a free-for-all. Hundreds of small firms all competing for a piece of a small but rapidly growing pie. New players are constantly entering the market. There's a boom and there's a bust. But this leads to phase 2. This is where we see massive consolidation. Bigger companies acquiring smaller ones. The total pie gets bigger, but less players are fighting for it, which paves the way for phase 3. This is when the mega deals happen. The big guys start merging with other big guys. And finally, we hit phase 4. The market has matured. The industry is full of blue chip stocks. When phase 1 kicked off for the cannabis industry, it was pure hysteria. It was the Wild West. Plenty of people got in before those companies soared, but just as many people probably waited until the peak to invest.
Here's the good news. The cannabis industry has entered phase 2. That means the industry is growing and a lot of the weak players have been weeded out. And luckily, many of the stocks with the highest upside are still dirt cheap right now. Cannabis was a $12.8 billion market in North America last year. And that number is projected to multiply many times over. Globally, 250 billion, 500 billion, maybe even more. That's what's in play. Phase 1 thinned out the herd, so to speak, and now you've got a bunch of premium pot stocks trading at a deep discount. So this is the time to strike.
But how do you pick the winners? Well, the entire team at the Institute has spent a lot of time studying the behavior of cannabis stocks. You can't use those old-fashioned metrics analysts tend to lean on when vetting blue chips, because cannabis stocks don't behave like blue chip stocks. You need a different process.
Yes, and here's what we found. The greatest predictor of success with cannabis stocks can be boiled down to 3 simple numbers. 1, that company's cash on hand number. 2, its insider ownership number. And 3, its MSO number.
So let's go through them one at a time.
Well, your cash on hand number, that's just the amount of cash you have in the bank. Danny, this is the most important number during phase 2, don't you think?
By far. Phase 2 for an industry is when we see a wave of mergers and acquisitions. Acquisitions with huge dollar figures attached to them. And this has already begun. Last year, one of my companies, Emblem, was acquired by Aleafia Health in a 9-figure deal. A few months later, Cresco Labs buys Canna Royalty for $1.1 billion. A couple months after that, Harvest Health buys Verano Holdings for $1.1 billion. That summer, Curaleaf acquires Grassroots for $875 million. A month after that, Tilray buys the cannabis brand 420 for up to $110 million. During phase 2, if you're a well-run company, you're either going to be the target of an acquisition or you're going to be on the hunt for smaller firms to acquire. Either way, you need a strong cash on hand number. And we look for companies that have at least $30 million. A lot of money for a small stock, enough to buy some even smaller competitors.
And if somebody big wants to acquire you, it gives you an even bigger bargaining chip. Checking to see if your favorite cannabis stock has at least $30 million of cash on hand is easy. You don't need expensive software. You just go to Yahoo Finance or Google Finance or whatever platform you use, click the Financials tab, and you'll see a cash on hand number for that stock. Then here's a shot of Emblem right around the time that company was sold. Not bad.
It's why they were able to get a 9-figure deal. Now, once you've confirmed a cannabis stock's cash on hand number, next you want to check its insider ownership number. And you want the C-level execs, directors, and insiders to own at least 30% of a cannabis company.
To me, this is just common sense. I mean, if those guys own 30% of all shares or more, you can almost guarantee their interests are aligned with yours. And during phase 2, CEOs and executives aren't collecting the multi-million-dollar paychecks like blue chip companies pay. They mainly are compensated in stock. And if they do their jobs, those shares could be worth hundreds of millions of dollars to them down the road.
And your shares could rise in value right beside theirs. To figure out a stock's insider ownership number, you can just stay on the same site you used for your cash on hand number. There will be a tab that says something like holders. Click that. If the number is 30% or higher, check that off the list and move on to the final number, the MSO number. This is a simple one to understand too. MSO stands for multi-state operator. How many states and even countries that company is doing business in.
And 3 is the magic number. If you're able to successfully run your cannabis business in 3 states or more, navigating through the different rules and regulations, the red tape.
Oh, that's a very promising sign.
Well, it is. And that MSO number is particularly relevant this year because we have a big election coming up. In the old days, the phase 1 days, If a state passed a new cannabis law, pot stocks everywhere tended to go crazy. I mean, rewind back to the 2016 election. 8 states passed major legalization bills. I mean, it made sense that a cannabis stock like Mentor Capital shot up right after the election. Mentor Capital is located in California. When Californians stepped into the voting booth in 2016, they legalized recreational cannabis. But why did companies like InMed and Canopy jump too? I mean, they're in Canada.
Well, rising tide lifts all boats. But that was a phase 1 phenomenon. Phase 2, you need to be a little bit more selective. This year we have 18 states that could pass significant marijuana legislation. Arizona, Florida, New York, Pennsylvania, Nebraska, New Jersey, and South Dakota among them. Some stocks are going to be huge winners, potentially on a scale we haven't seen before. Others are going to get totally wiped out. I feel pretty comfortable saying that the winners will be the multi-state operators. Specifically, companies already doing business in states with medical cannabis programs that could soon expand those programs or even go all in and legalize recreational use.
And we saw this happen with Green Thumb Industries before the last election, the 2018 midterms. Green Thumb is a vertically integrated cannabis business. They have cultivation facilities, processing centers, and dispensaries. From seed to sale, they control the supply chain. That August, their cash on hand number was $66 million.
More than twice the money needed to check the first box.
Let's check. And Green Thumb's insider ownership number was strong as well at 32.5%. Check. Their MSO number was 6. They were in 6 states. Check. And one of those states will make a big announcement that same month, Illinois. Tuesday, August 28th, the governor of Illinois announced he was expanding the state's medical marijuana program to fight the opioid epidemic. Not only does Green Thumb have dispensaries in Illinois, the company's headquarters are in Chicago. It took just 35 days for their stock to jump up 288%. Today, their MSO score is 12. They've doubled the amount of states where their products are being grown and sold.
Figuring out a cannabis stock's MSO number is as easy as the rest. Just go to their website, click on their About Us tab or their Operations tab. They're not going to hide it. They're going to flaunt all the states and territories and countries that they're in.